Hello again, sir.
Yes, hello, hello. So, should we start?
Yes, sir.
Ready, recharged.
Yes, I hope so.
So, dear participants, now Professor Lynda needs no introduction, although last session also I couldn't introduce because of internet. But now everyone knows. So better you start with this.
So, dear class, I can see 25 participants from different parts of India, looking by your names. So, I hope all of us will be able to make use of what I will be presenting in our respective disciplines. Now, I will start from the basic again because we don't know what level of understanding each of us have. I will start from the very, very basic. And let me begin with my slideshow as usual. Anybody from the sciences again would be able to understand, isn't it? Micro, extremely small. There is small, and then there is extremely small. That means very, very small. Sometimes they are so small that we cannot even see them with the naked eye. And likewise, a seasoned teacher and experienced teacher can make use of many of small teaching strategies, the strategies that we have spoken earlier in the whole, the whole act of teaching within a, given period of time in the maximum way so that teaching is enhanced without the students themselves even realizing it. I don't know how many of you have gone through micro teaching training, but as far as this digital interface can allow us today, I'm going to try to make it as interactive as possible. So once we understand teaching, once we understand the meaning of micro, then micro teaching is not a difficult concept to understand. So what do we mean by micro teaching? A scaled down teaching encounter. The whole teaching may stretch for 1.5 hours or 1 hour. So we scale it down. 5 minutes. How much can I, contain in 5 minutes? In 10 minutes, 15 minutes, in a minute? How much will I be able to put as part of the content of a 5 minutes worth of teaching? A scaled down teaching encounter. So it is a teacher training technique for learning teaching skills. It employs a real teaching situation for developing skills and helps to get a deeper knowledge regarding the art of teaching. I'm going to show you a simple image that I have downloaded from the site. This is from the site of Google Scholar. I have taken this from the Google Scholar so that I will be able to make my, brief introduction as small as possible. So there are certain steps in micro teaching. The first one is pre-observation. Then the second is observation. The third is analysis. The fourth is supervisory conference. So as you can see from the various steps, it's already very obvious, I think, that micro-teaching is a concept of teacher training. So this came up very early during the 1960s when videos came. And they could be incorporated in the Western world, in the teaching world. Of course, at this time, nothing like this could be incorporated in classrooms in the, eastern part of the world, including countries like Japan also, including countries like China also, which now are by far the most advanced. During this time, in the beginning, when micro-teaching was introduced, it was basically initiated in the Western countries, in the Western schools, to help the teacher learner understand himself. So what was done was, I will not break it down as you have seen in this image. I will simply explain the whole concept of the origin of micro teaching. So when teacher educators admitted themselves to teacher training schools, what they found out was that many teachers could learn the concept of teaching. Many teachers could learn the concept of learning also, but a very, very difficult part, yet an important concept, an important part of teaching was for the teacher to know himself, for the teacher to know herself. I told you, in a very, very strictly teacher-centered teaching, the teacher only looks at the outward behavior. He sees what is going on in the classroom. All right, out of 50 students are here. The classroom is clean. I am here, so let me start teaching. So these were all the major factors he looked into before he started on the journey of his teaching. So there was no question of students' preparedness to learn, willingness to learn, so on and so forth. So the teacher was also not very much interested in what was going on in the students' minds. He was only ever interested in himself accomplishing what was to be done at a particular point of time. For example, in our case, within a semester, I should complete this. That was what the teacher was solely interested in, almost nothing else. So it was found out that teachers were able to accomplish what they had set out to do. But on the other hand, the students were not satisfied. They were not happy with what was being taught by the teachers in their classrooms. So the concept of the whole teacher education training was initiated, and these were called the normal schools. They were practiced in the United Kingdom, they were practiced in the United States, and they spill over to India. And now teacher education programs are one of the most vibrant and active programs within the whole of India, regardless of the level of teaching we have. So in a micro teaching, what was the objective was not for the students, but for the teachers themselves to know themselves. Is my teaching effective? For example, the topic of my teaching today is how to bake a cake. How to bake a cake. Will my students, after one class, learn how to bake a cake? So what was done was the teacher trainee would be made to prepare a very, very careful lesson plan. A lesson plan that would last for a stipulated amount of time. And that stipulated amount of time would contain all the elements needed to enable a person to bake a cake. But it was not complete in the sense that, remember, the teacher would want to observe himself. Other people can observe him, but it's very, very important that he observe himself, because other people can observe only so much. They can understand only so much. So therefore, the teacher needed to know himself, how he was teaching, how his teaching was accepted by the students, and also ultimately how effective his teaching was. And in order to do that, a very active live performance is the best feedback. So with that in mind, the teacher trainee, and sometimes teachers who were already training also, who were already in service, were also made to train. So the teachers would teach and a video would be put up. So the video would be having a live coverage of the teacher trainee teaching the students. Usually it would be a small group. Then the teacher trainee would then teach for maybe about, the stipulated time would not last more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes usually. So he would teach, and then when his given time was up, he would be made to see his own teaching. So he taught to his heart's content, and after that was over, he would watch himself teaching through the video. So in that way, not only would he himself be giving himself the feedback of his teaching, maybe throughout his teaching, he was not looking at his students. Maybe throughout his teaching, he was not paying attention to his students. Maybe throughout his teaching, he was, actively using one word repeatedly. And then throughout his teaching, it was felt that he was just skimming too many information within a short amount of time. So all of these things were noted down. And then in that small group, they shared. Student teacher number one, you were strong in these sectors. Student teacher number one, you were weak in these sectors. These are your strengths, these are your weaknesses. Now see for yourself. What do you think of yourself? So once I have seen myself, my performance, then I will be able to make out many things that my partners have not been able to make, have not been able to discern. For example, when I look at my teaching, I find myself constantly using gestures when it is not necessary, using my hands all the time, flipping my hair, readjusting my glasses, touching my nose, touching my chin. So I saw myself excessively using my hands. So even though my friends did not mention that part, since I myself saw what I did, I am now able to evaluate myself as an outsider. Myself as an outsider. So in that way, it was thought that the best way to evaluate is to evaluate oneself. And what can be better, what could be better than to make use of a live video streaming? So that was done. Now, in the modern day, this video coverage is not so much made use of in the modern classrooms, although there is, wider applicability, as we all know, of our own mobile phones also. These are hardly, made use of in the classrooms today. So instead, what is being done today is the students are being still broken down into groups, but videos are no longer used. Of course, there are some institutions still try to make use of videos, but videos are not used now for a number of reasons, which I will not disclose now. So what is majorly being used these days is the feedback from friends, the feedback from classmates who are in that small group. So the student teachers, they evaluate others and then they also evaluate themselves. So each student teacher evaluates others and then himself or herself. So these are the classical steps in micro teaching. And today, when we look at micro teaching, we are not so much interested in going through all of these classical steps as we are interested in seeing that each and every teacher learns and knows how to make use of a particular micro teaching skill so that his ability to teach will be enhanced. So on that note, as I said earlier, some of you might have been through some micro teaching sessions in the live, interface, but some of you may also have gone through very, very theoretical micro teaching sessions. I don't know, since it's very, very important to know your students, your audience, but today my disadvantage is I don't know you, largely besides the fact that I am sitting in front of several postgraduates who know enough about their own subjects to be admitted as teachers in universities and colleges. Besides that, I hardly know anything about you, your disciplines, your likes, your dislikes, your first languages, all of these things I do not know. I know only the bare necessities. And on those bare necessities, what I have decided today is to pick up a small topic which I think anyone, regardless of his or her discipline, would be able to appreciate. And making use of that, you may even use a camera as I show you the slide. Making use of that simple slide, making use of that small uh, topic, we are going to try to learn the skills of micro teaching. Remember, the basic idea of micro teaching is to break down a bigger lesson into smaller parts so that all of those things become clear to the student. It may be a huge topic, but broken down into small pieces so that students can understand. For example, a plus b whole thing square is equal to a square plus b square plus twice ab, let us say. But that may not be so easy for a class 6 boy. So in order to make that simplification easy, the class 6 boy has to be again taught how to make use of multiplication. What is the significance of a square? What is the significance of a bracket? What is the significance of multiplication? All of those mathematical terms, all of those mathematical methods, arithmetic methods, he has to learn again. So just like that, we are trying to break a bigger chunk into smaller pieces so that students can eat and be full. So on that note, let me show you the slide. So you can even take pictures of what I will be showing. It's a small pond, not very small. It's, I think, not I think I don't know. Has anyone ever read about the old horse? You have read about the old horse, you can say yes. There is nothing to be frightened of. I'm not going to, give very difficult questions based on this. So I will just read it out. And my request, my very, very strong request is that you take a picture of the screen, make sure, or otherwise, if you have very good memories, try to, retain it in your memory, because I may not be able to come back. Or of course, if there is a need, I will come back. So anyway, let me start reading. The Old Horse by Alfred Noyes in the year 1930s. During the year 1930s, the old horse, Dobbin, out at grass, turns his tail to the winds that pass, sees his master, a small black dot, riding on a new mare. Clippity clop. The old horse, Dobbin, out at grass, turns his tail to the winds that pass, stares at the white road winding down through the dwindling fields to the distant town. I will add two more stanzas only. From the distance, he hears, you can take a picture of this also. From the distance, he hears a short, sharp trot, sees his master, a small, dark dot. See the rhyme? A short, sharp trot, a small, dark dot, riding away on the smart new mare that came last month from Pulborough Fair. No, smart new mare, Pulborough Fair. And Dobbin remembers, as horses may, how often he trotted that ringing way, and his old heart aches with a heavier lot as he stands and wanders and stares at the road. Let me read it again. The old horse Dobbin out at grass turns his tail to the winds that pass, sees his master, a small black dot, riding on a new mare, clippity-clop. The old horse Dobbin, out at grass, turns his tail to the winds that pass, stares at the wide road winding down through the dwindling fields to the distant town. From the distance he hears a short, sharp trot, sees his master, a small dark dot, riding away on the smart new mare that came last month from Pulborough Fair. And Dobbin remembers, as horses may, how often he trotted that ringing way, and his heart aches with a heavier load as he stands and wonders and stares at the road. So, as teachers of no particular discipline, if you are made to teach on this topic to your class who are undergraduates, how will you teach? Now, micro teaching, as I said, is breaking down the whole topic into smaller learning points so that students will be able to grasp and understand more. Remember, I said I stipulated the age as undergraduates, not graduates, not postgraduates, undergraduates. So, therefore, they are certainly below the age of 20, but hopefully above the age of 16 or 17. So on that note, let us look into the first micro teaching skill. The first micro teaching skill is the skill of introduction. As I said, this particular session I am hoping will be as interactive as this kind of interface, this digital learning strategy allows us to be. So can any one of you write in the chat box how you would introduce this poem to your students? Yes, the story of a horse. Michael wants it. Thank you very much. So how would you introduce? It's about the story of a mare that gets jealous of her master, getting a new one. Beautiful, Andrew. Thank you very much. So today we are going to learn about the story of a mare that gets jealous of her master getting a new one. Isn't it? So, yes, best old days. So you are learning. So let me just post something here and see if I... Now, what do you think if I introduce the lesson like this? So, have you heard of Alfred Noyes? Do you think I'd be getting a positive answer? Very nice, Dr. Lashkar. This is about a horse and his master because it is also about a horse and his master. So you all have given very, very nice introductions. That tells me, even before I go further, that you all are very well accomplished teachers in your own right. So now, supposing I suddenly show them the poem, and then I ask a question. Have you heard of Alfred Noyes? I don't think anybody would have heard. I don't think in your group anyone has ever heard of Alfred Noyes. So the answer obviously is going to be no. No, sir. No, ma'am. No, miss, I have not heard of this. So it's going to be starting on a negative road. The students have not heard of Alfred Noyes. But A simple thing. This is the story of a horse and its master. You know, you all have come up with such beautiful, introductions. This is the story of, I'm sorry, I am at the wrong slide. The skill of introduction. I can see that you all have, very well prepared set of introductory skills. I know there are more than 20 of you there. Only about 5 or 6 attempts have come up. I don't know how much more capable the rest of you are going to be, but from what I can see that you all are, you already have an ability to introduce the best old days. The story of a mare that gets jealous of her master getting a new one. The story of a horse. So from the way you have introduced, the students will also be able to know a little bit about you. For example, when they look at Michael Wanshi, they might say Wanshi is a practical student, and Fan Ai is an imaginative student. And then Tony Eng, he is nostalgic student. And then again, Dr. Sadiki, he is a practical student. So your personalities can also come up when you introduce your stories. The story of Dobbin, an old horse. This is the story. I may introduce it like this. This is the story of Dobbin, an old horse who is replaced by a younger horse. Not only is he jealous, but he is also sad because every day he sees his master riding on the new horse. So we have successfully introduced. Now let us go to the next. When you drop, for example, let me just go back and the old heart aches with a heavier load. This is the story of a horse whose heart is aching with a heavy load. That does introduce the subject to a certain extent. But I think you and I, we know very clearly at that point of time, the student will not even be able to make out what is that heavier load. Heavier means you are comparing one load with another. So what sort of load are we talking about? They haven't spent enough time, but you all have started very nicely by, starting out with the first very obvious proper way to introduce, which is by introducing the bare necessities, even lesser than a précis. You all know what a summary is. A summary will contain, a comprehensive information of a certain topic, but in a shorter way. Then we come to a précis, which will contain an even shorter version of the whole information. But when you come to the micro teaching skills, when you come to the micro level, you only need the bare necessities. And especially when you are introducing, you don't need to add so much. You only need to add the bare necessities so that students will be able to build on that. So the second is the skill of explaining. So can anyone type again how you would explain these 4 stanzas to your undergraduate students? Try again. I really enjoy seeing your, attempts, because these are much better than mine. So can I see how you would explain the skill of explaining? I'll give you 2 minutes. You have introduced that the poetry, the poem, is about the horse and his master, about best old days, story of a mare that gets jealous of her master, the story of a horse. So how would you explain the poem to your undergraduate students? Come on. No attempts. All right, I'm seeing an attempt from Michael Wansway. An old horse named Dobbin, watching from his fence, watching his master riding on a new mare and feeling sad and reminiscing. Yes. Um, So you are explaining, isn't it? Thank you so much, Michael Wansby. The old horse named Dobbin in this poem is watching from his fence because his master thinks he is too old to carry his weight, so he has bought a new mare from the fair, the very fair where he used to take his master. His master has bought a new mare from the very fair from which they used to go together. So now the master is in possession of a new mare who is stronger, more sprightly than him. So they don't even want to put any weight on Dobbin anymore. But being old does not mean the memories are gone. Being old does not mean he cannot feel sad. Because on this day, having nothing on his back weighs more on Dobbin the horse than having his master sitting on his back. And to explain this concept so that we can understand, you may take the example of a sick man or a sick woman who used to be very strong. Because she has become sick or he has become sick and old, he cannot do heavy work anymore. But old people who cannot do heavy work, who cannot do heavy household work also, sometimes they feel sad because feeling useless is a heavy weight. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Lashkar. The horse Dobbin feels that he is valueless for his master and he feels sad, isn't it? So now you are trying to explain this is not just the story of a horse and his master. It's not just the story of an old horse being jealous of a new mare. It's not the story of a horse. It's the story of Dobbin, who is an old horse who has been replaced by a younger horse who now feels valueless, useless, because his master no longer has any use of him. So now the students are, they can understand this is not just the story of a horse. It's not just the story of a horse and his master. It's not just about a jealous horse. It's about a horse who is genuinely saddened by impending death, by impending old age. One day my teacher will be old too. One day I will be old too. How will I feel when I get old? This is something that we all teachers must face. A time will come when, even if we still think we are young, the government may not consider us, worthy to teach. And some new, young, smart students will come up, much more prepared than us. So when you explain it not just in terms of the horse and the replacement and the master, the relationship, the triangle between the three. You are also trying to understand, isn't it, Mr. Tony? You are also trying to understand how, if the horse had been you, how you would feel, isn't it? So a very, very good teacher would try to explain it in such a way that the student would be able to feel closest to what is being explained. The skill of questioning. So, how would you question your students about this horse, this Dobbin? How would you can, for example, you can simply give your question in a very, very, in a very, very easy manner. What is the name of the poet? Easy to answer. So now, how would you question the students in the best way to arouse their interest? Can you give some questions, please? Can you give some examples of questions based on any part of the poem to arouse your students' interest? Another 2 minutes, please. Yes. What is your feeling about the horse when he feels useless? Thank you, Dr. Lashkar. This is a good question, isn't it? Because we are teaching undergraduates who can be very, very sentimental. Mr. Tony, your question is not to the point. What is the best thing you can do? I don't think that is too much to the point, but thank you for your contribution. Can you be more specific than that? What is the best thing you can do in the same situation, or can you be more elaborative? For example, what if I type like this? I'm wondering if I can type, because the last time I tried to type, I lost many things. You know. What weighed heavier for Dobbin than the weight of his master on his back? So can you give me the answer to this? Let me see whether I'm a good questioner, whether I have the skill of questioning. My question is, what weighed heavier for Dobbin than the weight of his master on his back? Can anyone answer? My question is, what weighed heavier for Dobbin than the weight of his master on his back? How will you feel one day you're not able to do that? Very good. Mr. Tony, this is a very good continuation to what you had initially done. What is the best thing you can do? How will you feel one day when you're not able to do that? Yes, this is very good, because you are not just questioning about the text anymore, but you are now connecting the story to the students. How would you feel? This is a very, very good question. I may answer it like this to Mr. Tony. If the question was given to me, I may answer, I would also feel as sad as Dobbin is feeling. I would also feel very sad, because it's always painful not to be needed. Isn't it? So maybe I have not phrased the question very well, so I don't have very good questioning skills. What weighed heavier for Dobbin than the weight of his master on his back? If you will look back on the poem, you will see, and Dobbin remembers as horses may how often he trotted that ringing way, and his old heart aches with a heavier lot as he stands and wanders and stares at the road. With a heavier lot, what weighed heavier than his master? The master would be heavy, but what was heavier? I might answer, but since the answers did not come from your side, this might have been a bit more complex than I had thought. So I might say, wait, I see, is this the response that I see? Let me see. Losing the riding with his master. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Tony. So losing the riding with his master, it weighed heavier, and that is the correct answer, isn't it? The weight of uselessness was heavier. Isn't it? Being useless became more painful, was much more heavy than having a real weight. The weight of being useless was much more heavy than being, excuse me, just a moment, please. The light has gone down in my room. I need to switch on my light. So the skill of questioning is, my question may have been too complex for undergraduates. So when you give your questions, remember to give your questions in a direct mode, making sure that the questions are simple enough for students to answer. That is very, very important. So I'm not going to give myself a pass mark based on this, because ultimately only one of you attempted, and that was Mr. Tony again. So although I truly appreciate this, I still would give myself fail marks, or maybe the bottom 30% or so, because the question was a bit too complex at this point of time when the story has just been introduced to the class in general. So now, I will just resume the slide show. Sorry. The next would be the skill of stimulus variation. How did you all feel when I left the screen? Can anyone tell me how you all felt when I left the screen? All right, maybe it might be a little bit difficult to answer that. I will just stop my video for this moment. I hope you can still hear me. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Actually, sir, I was hoping the students would be able to answer. So when I stopped the video, what happened? And I asked you that question. Uh, uh, thank you, Miss Bernali Thakuria. Thank you very much. So I'm glad to know that I am audible. But in a real class situation, when we talk about stimulus variation, stimulus is what? Something that causes a change, isn't it? The mosquito bites you, you scratch it. Stimulus, the mosquito bite. Scratch, your action. You tell them a story, that is a stimulus. You explain, that is a stimulus. Then suddenly, if in the middle of the story, the teacher stops. See, one thing, the downside of having these, um, mm, alternate learning strategies is that they serve to a great extent, but when it comes to real practice learning and teaching, they can be a bit difficult to follow. Now, the skill of stimulus variation is there is always a danger of being too monotonous. I'm going to just escape from this. Uh, so the skill of stimulus variation is so So the teacher changing his tone, his voice, maybe the speed, anything that has been using to explain a lesson to the students, suddenly changing the way he explains. This is also a very, very important element of lecture. When the teacher becomes too monotonous, the teacher is constantly explaining, even the most interesting of stories become monotonous. Remember, a research done back in the 1970s clearly showed that the average span of interest of a normal human being was 20 minutes. And most of our lectures in the classroom, they extend beyond that, isn't it? I don't think there is any class inclusive of KG classes less than 20 minutes. So therefore, you can only understand how difficult, not just for you, but also for us teachers when we sit in your places to continue to put our attention to what is going on in the classroom. So therefore, when there is a sudden change, I think when Professor Bartendu suddenly came with his answer, your attention spiked, isn't it? I gave the simple question. Let me switch off my video. Can you still see me? Am I audible? And instead of you all answering, Professor Bartendu answered. So that that change in voice. It's not just Professor Lynda Zohmingliani who's speaking here. There is another voice. There is someone else here with us. So that shows that that triggers a new kind of attention. The change when there is a bomb exploding, you become startled, isn't it? You become startled. So just like that, when you constantly hear bombs exploding, you will not be startled anymore. So just like that, that shock, that little bit of shock, that change in the stimulus is called stimulus variation. Sometimes the class is too rowdy, they are too noisy, and suddenly the teacher stops speaking. One by one, the students will notice that the teacher has stopped speaking. So if they notice that, and if they see that the teacher is no longer speaking, very, very slowly, each of them will notice and they will become embarrassed, and silence will be there in the class. So in many ways, the teacher can use stimulus variation to do away with monotony in the classroom. All right. So now let me go to the next part. The skill of reinforcement. Reinforced. When you want to build a house, you don't just want normal cement. You want reinforced cement. If you want to build dams, you want reinforced cement. So when we talk about reinforce, we are talking about making it stronger, strengthening something. So the lesson was about Dobbin. So what part of the story do you need to see strengthened? What part of the story would best help the students in understanding the plight of the horse, and from there coming to understanding about themselves and old age, because the whole purpose of learning about Dobbin is understanding about old age. Okay. So the whole purpose, as I said, is understanding about old age. So how do you reinforce? I will just go back, because Alfred Novice is very, very skilled in reinforcement. I will just show you just how skilled he is. The old horse Dobbin, out at grass he goes, riding on a new mare, clippity clop. Then the next stanza, the old horse Dobbin. He is repeating. It's not that he lacks in vocabulary, but he wants to reinforce old, the old horse Dobbin. So each time he is reinforcing that Dobbin is old. He is an old horse. He has given different kinds of activities. He can still see his master. He can see the winding road that leads to the next town. But the things that he, is the things that he is interacting with, they are changing. At one time, he's talking about the wind and the scene of his master, and in the next stanza, he's talking about the wide road winding down through the dwindling fields in the distant town. And then he hears a short, sharp trot, a small dark dot, a new mare, and Dobbin remembers. How often? So in each stanza, the poet is trying to reiterate, he's trying to reinforce the fact that Dobbin is old. So in a way, he is trying to reiterate that this is the story of old age. So when we talk about reinforcement, we are talking about putting forth a particular fact again and again, so that in the midst of so many different facts that the students are bombarded with, at least the important points go through. The important points are given. Extra stress, reinforcement. Do you have an old person in your home? Can she or he do the things that you can do? Can he jump? Can he run like you? Can old people do the things that you do? Can they sing well? Can they do household chores like you can do? All of these questions are to be kept in mind of the teacher in a clever way, so that the students will be able to grasp. So the skill of reinforcement, it's telling us that the students may not be able to grasp the whole thing, but that the horse is old. It is a horse. He has a new master. The concept of old age. All of these are points of interest to note in this poem. So here, the skill of reinforcement is very strong. In an offline class, I would be, making each of you do a small particular activity to, know and understand the skill of a reinforcement. But since from my vantage point, which is no vantage point at all, it's very, very difficult. I'm asking that all of you take this by heart. You take what we have learned by heart and you try to incorporate them. Then we come to the next skill. The skill of illustration. Illustration means simply to explain. The poem is an illustration itself. It is an illustration of old age. One thing that old people are mostly sad about is they are useless. If you have your grandparents in your home, see, illustration, examples. I don't know how many of you still have are still fortunate enough to have grandparents at home, but if you do, and if you have your own children, they will sometimes give sweets to your children that the parents do not otherwise allow. So the grandparents will, in a very, very crafty way, sneaky way, try to bribe the grandchildren so that the grandchildren will like them. In my case, the grandmother, my mother, she tries to bribe my children by allowing them to see the mobile phone when I have not allowed them to do so. There is a very, very, sound reason behind grandparents, grand anything, grand uncles, grandparents, aunts being overly affectionate. One thing is they have learned a lot, and wisdom has taught them that it is not always wise to constantly discipline, But behind that is another fact, which is their own insecurity. That insecurity has risen from the fact that they are now not as useful as they once were. So, in order to feel secure, they need the love of the young ones. And since they can hardly do anything, most of them feel the way they can get the love of the grandchildren is by buying that love. So you can illustrate the feeling, the fears that come with old age by giving examples that your students will be able to appreciate. Now, that example that I had just given, for those of you who are not married, it will not make much sense. But for those of you who are married with children, you will be able to appreciate that. So therein lies the importance of illustrations. You were speaking to young college students. What kind of examples will they be able to appreciate? I remember one time trying to explain the concept of stereotyping and typecasting to my my third year B.Ed students. And I think some of you in this group might be able to remember Om Puri from Mogambo Kushua, So I explained there was a very, very beautiful movie called Mr. India. So in that, there was a very, very bad villain. So he was really bad in that movie. So when the new film came, no longer Mr. India, but a new film, that same person, he came, and everyone in the audience starts shouting, "Oh, the villain has come." So regardless of the name of the film, regardless of what kind of film it was, whenever that person came, was it Amrish Puri? I think it was Amrish Puri, not Om Puri. Om Puri is another actor entirely. I'm sorry. So when that actor came, he was typecast already. He was always the villain of the piece, regardless of the film. It could be a romantic saga, it could be the story about families, anything. He was always the bad man. So I tried to tell them about typecasting and stereotyping based on that actor. And I found out that none of my students could appreciate that because most of them were born after the year 1998, 2000. So they were not old enough to understand the story. They were not old enough to, appreciate the the reappearance of that actor in similar roles in different films. So I had to find something that they could connect with. So I started with James Bond. And the minute I spoke about James Bond, they said Daniel Craig. You and I think many of us, we have seen different James Bonds, but for this generation, James Bond is Daniel Craig. So therefore, when I use Daniel Craig, when I use James Bond, they could understand. So the skill of illustration lies in, again, the teacher knowing the students. So the skill of blackboard writing. Now, let me pretend to write something. When I was a young boy, I remember. Okay. I said something while I was writing on the blackboard. Could you hear what I was saying? Could any of you hear what I was saying while I was writing on the whiteboard? I was facing away from you all. Okay. Vivo, you could hear me. Wow. Okay. Okay, I'm not surprised. So the skill of blackboard writing is also something that all of us teachers, we need to relearn. Nobody would find it difficult to write on the blackboard. But when we say skill of blackboard writing, remember, just because we have been using the so many gifts of technology, so many resources like projectors, the smart board, everything else, it does not mean that the skill of blackboard writing is no longer necessary. So what are the general skills in using the blackboard? I would just like to explain. I know time is running, but I will try to finish in time. Number one, I wanted to, write as I speak to you because I feel all of these things are so important. And very, very important thing is that teacher should not speak while writing on the black whiteboard. This is very, very important. When you are going to write something on the blackboard, you spend your time, 100% of your time to write. Once your writing is done, yes, I have written something. Can you read? Does it make sense to you? So when you use the blackboard, make sure that you don't divide your attention between the blackboard and your students, because your students are going to lose. That time when I was facing away from you and was trying to speak to you, and right at the same time, you all reported that you could not hear. Those of you could not hear much. So because of that, let us try to remember that when as teachers we use blackboards, whiteboards, whatever we have, it could be green boards also. Let us not divide our attention. Let us, when we are going to use the blackboard, let us put our whole attention on what is being used in the blackboard. And another thing is, this shows the neatness, the tidiness of the teacher, wiping the blackboard before leaving class. And it also suggests that you have respect for the teacher who is coming next. Because you don't know whether your students are going to rub the blackboard or not, or whether they are going to erase the blackboard or not. So seeing that the blackboard is left in a neat, clean state, it shows that you have respect for your fellow teacher. These are simple teaching ethics. Then the skill of achieving closure. Closure is very, very important. So that was not very skilled. I showed you the next slide, which is a concluding slide. I deliberately did that so that you would understand the power of closure. Can anyone explain to me the meaning of closure as it is? Closure. Anyone? Closure. How do you explain closure? Yes, I see a comment. Emotional attachment. Anyone else? CLOSURE. Satisfying ending. Thank you. Mr. Andrew. Thank you, Ms. Nafisa. Tying up all loose ends. An appropriate end. Very good. So when you come to an appropriate end, you want a satisfying ending that would tie up all your loose ends. Isn't it? So all of you have come up with, very, very beautiful understanding, explanations of closure that when I combine gives a real comprehensive explanation of closure. A satisfying ending that ties up all loose ends in order to come up with an appropriate end. So this is what closure is all about. A satisfying ending. Thank you so much, Dr. Lashkar. So when the closure that we speak about here is not about mental closeness, but here we are talking about closing the topic. How do we close the topic in such a way that all the loose ends are being tied up and that there is a satisfying ending so that students all can understand. So can anyone give an attempt to give a nice closure to the poem, The Old Horse? 2 minutes, and then we're done. Mr. Adhikari is already thanking me because I had not done a very skillful closure. Before I had completed my lecture, I started on the thank you slide, isn't it? So when the teacher is, ahead of time, then that may not be very, very wise. To say to the class is almost over. Class, pay attention. Class is almost over. Then you will certainly lose the attention of your students. They will want to pack their bags, their pencils, their books, whatever they have on their table, because class is almost over. So how do you come to a satisfying ending? On a serious note, as all of you have suggested, you come to a satisfying ending by tying up all the loose ends, really. You try to come to a satisfying ending. I see one, yes, little did he know his master favors him and bought the new mare to lessen his work. Yes. Little did he know his master favors him and has bought the new mare to lessen his work. That is one kind of closure. Another kind of closure would be how sad it must be for old people to know that they are growing old and dying. How sad it must be for old people to find out that people think they are getting old. So closure, in a way, the students, your audience, will be able to take away something important. Mr. Tony has come up with something very, very important. Dobbin's master favored him. And yes, he was old, true. And yes, he had a new mare to take him to the market, true. But what Dobbin did not know was that he was still being given free rein, freedom in the grass that belonged to his master. Although he was no longer working actively for his master still favored him by allowing him to graze in his meadow. So on that note, I hope all of us have learned how to make the best of the time that we are given. Thank you all for giving me your time. And I thank my senior, Professor Bartendu, for this time. And on that note, sir, may I close my video?
Yes, sure.
Thank you, sir, for giving me time. I enjoyed myself a lot.
Thank you. Actually, we also enjoyed your lecture.
Thank you, sir.
I know you are a very soft speaker, but you are even softer than what you used to be. And you utilized pause very well. How
Thank you,
and
sir.
when to pause, take pause. And
Thank you, sir.
during your pause, actually, we started thinking. You made us
That was
think
the
in
whole
that
point.
way. So
Thank you very much.
sometimes we need to pause in class also so that students may run their mind.
Yes.
The good technique we need to learn from you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, so much. And dear participants, thank you so much for giving me your time, and have a good evening to all of you.
Okay, so Professor Lynda, from on behalf of all the participants and HRDC, I would like to say thanks to you, and hope in some other program we will call you again very soon. Thank you. So, dear participants, this was the class today. 4 very interesting talks we already had. Now, tomorrow will be a new day, and we'll be having 4 new speakers tomorrow. So first session will start tomorrow at 10 with Professor K. Rama Mohan Rao. He is in Faculty of Commerce and Management Studies, Andhra University, and he will be speaking on improving productivity through time management. Then second session will be from Professor S.K. Mehta. He is former Dean of Life Sciences from Mizoram University. He is from Department of Botany, and he will be talking about ethics in research. Then post-lunch session at 1:30, Dr. Ved Prakash, he is head Department of Industrial Chemistry. He will be talking on waste management and recycling awareness. And the last session tomorrow will be taken by Dr. Hiraman Roy. He is Senior Associate Professor from School of Business, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, Dehradun. And he will be talking on turn post-pandemic economic challenges into opportunities. So these 4 sessions will be there tomorrow. So with this, we end today. Let's take rest. Let us give some time to think what we discussed, what we listened today. And tomorrow morning, we'll meet again at 10 sharp. So good night to you all. Take care. Bye-bye. Now you all may log off. Let's meet tomorrow at 10.